Electrocast.
And he basically said from the moment of the Big Bang, there is an intelligence embedded into the fabric of the universe that is evolving us towards coherence, right? So that is that love, if you will. And so my parting thoughts would be that, I'll tell you from my many years of trying to get degrees in consciousness and 30 years of HeartMath research, it gets really simple for me that the highest, best thing we can do for ourselves, others, the planet, and even the universe is to run more heart energy, more love through our energetic system.
Welcome, beautiful souls, to Season 3 of the Cosmic Love Antenna with your host, Harrison Ma. I invite you on a mystical voyage from the intellect to the soul, delving deep into the mysteries of love's spiritual essence and its divine unfolding. This podcast celebrates the peeling back of heart layers, revealing beautiful, profound lessons, interviews with loving spiritual seekers, and practices and tools to open up your heart to love's infinite wisdom. I'm so excited to have you and grateful that our hearts have connected. Enjoy the show. Good morning, evening, afternoon, beautiful beings. Welcome back to another episode of the Cosmic Love Antenna with your host, Harrison. Today's chat and cosmic dance is one I'm really excited about. I'm excited about most chats on this platform, but today is a new realm around the topic of HeartMath that I haven't had the pleasure to really go into deeply yet. And I have a powerful man and a powerful heart to help me illuminate all things HeartMath today. Before I get into that, I just want to remind everyone that's joining either live or listening to the podcast, if you get some value out of this today, it hits your heart in all the ways, you can share it out with a friend, a family member, or a lover. It supports the show. And if you want more conversations like this, it ignites you in a specific way, you can leave your feedback over on Apple and Spotify, and that helps me pick topics just for you. Speaking of topics, today I am going deep into all things HeartMath with the powerful and loving Rollin McCraty. Rollin is the director of research at HeartMath, and with his help today, we're going to break down what is HeartMath, what is the mission behind it, what is heart coherence, talking about the heart's magnetic field, its importance with connection to others, and all the spiritual understandings in between. Rollin, it's a pleasure, my friend, to invite you to the Cosmic Love Antenna.
Thanks, Harrison. It's nice to be here.
We were just chatting before we started. It's afternoon / early evening and morning here. And I've already started connecting into my heart field to send to you to pick it up. I'm wondering is it coming through yet? Are you picking up on the heart field? It's coming. Rollin, I guess where I want to start with you is I want to read you the vision statement that I'm sure you're very familiar with from HeartMath. And I would love if you feel called to add anything to what I'm missing around really what HeartMath stands for. HeartMath has the vision of a kinder, heart-centered world where we care for one another and live in harmoniously in peace. What else can we add to that, Rollin, from your experience?
Well, that's a pretty good vision statement. I think that's really what we're about. I mean, HeartMath exists and was created 30 some years ago to really help people navigate the stressful times that we're in now. We kind of foresaw that coming, and so we're really, another way we could say that is that we're really about co-creating a kinder, more compassionate world. And we do that through conducting research is one of the ways on interconnectivity and providing and developing research-backed and research-proven tools and techniques that help ultimately raise humanity's baseline consciousness to where we become more collaborative and live together more harmoniously and cooperatively.
Yeah, it's really beautiful, Rollin, and I'm excited to speak a little bit about the science today and what you do and how it's impacting this beautiful mission that you have. What I would love to know first, Rollin, just because I'm interested, and I'm sure people tuning in are, how did you get involved in HeartMath? How did your heart find its way to this coherent center?
Well, that can be a long story or a short story. The short version is personal experience. At the time, well, let me say a little bit more about that. My original career was electrical engineering. I was a communication engineer. I used to work for Motorola and that kind of thing. And I was always interested in the more fundamental and deeper aspects of things that we talked a lot about, like magnetic fields. And I would ask questions like, well, what is it? A magnetic field or an electric field or some of these types of things that we learned and was using in my day-to-day life and job. And that always frustrated professors and things. And because it was always about the formulas that describe their behavior. No. I want to know, what is it? No, don't go away. Really. And we still don't really know.
Yeah. Sort of the bigger questions.
Yeah. Anyway, that longer story short, a little shorter, that led me to exploring some other avenues. And I accidentally ran across a book in a bookstore and that had some other perspectives on it. And which ultimately many years later led me to move to California and get a degree in consciousness studies, which I did. So I learned about meditation and all the many forms and a lot of things through those years, and started a company in electrostatics, and became a very successful company. And I was working with a lot of big companies, from everything from the plant managers of big, like automotive companies and silicon manufacturers, and all the way down to the people working on the assembly lines and floors. And it amazed me. This has been in the 80s. I used to think to myself, God, how do these companies stay in business? Really, I mean, the amount of discord and the infighting and I was just amazed. It was hard for us to get our job done, installing our systems in these factories because of all this going on. Anyway, that's a little bit of a
sidetrack. And Rollin, but so I don't think it's a sidetrack at all, because I think, this and I know this, but what you are sort of subtly referring to is, work environments that don't have that coherence.
Yeah, well, exactly. They're extremely incoherent.
Yeah, that heart coherence.
Yeah, and later a lot of those companies didn't do so well in business, but, as it turned out. But then I, through the folks that I met in the consciousness studies and degrees and studies on that, I was involved in that organization that brought spirulina to the world as the motive and the humanitarian. It was a true humanitarian motive behind that, which was to feed hungry people, the world's hungry populations. And I'm going to make this story shorter, but we ended up selling a lot of it through a National Enquirer, did a big story, and sold millions of dollars worth of it in a very short time, and took the profits of that and built a demonstration plant in Southern California to prove that you could actually do this. You could go in the middle of a desert and grow spirulina and feed people. It was a perfect kind of superfood. And anyway, I don't want to get too into those details. And that went nowhere. And it wasn't the problem with the technology. We had that. We were way ahead of our time, actually. Giant solar powered spray dryers and things for producing the stuff and all this. And I kind of vowed to myself after that experience, I have all these studies in consciousness, so I know about consciousness, right? And it's all about consciousness. Well, after that, it became more of a concept, a mental concept, to a much deeper understanding. And I sort of, at that point in my life, it's been also late 80s, said, well, the heck with this humanitarian stuff. I'm going to go make money again. That's when I went and started my other electrostatics company. And which was, as I said, pretty successful. And there was a point, and it was a lot of fun. Don't get me wrong. We had offices around the world, and we're doing really well.
The human ego was satisfied in that situation.
Well, yeah, and it was a fun factor too.
Yeah.
But there was something a little bit deeper in me that was a yearning, even though I had said, I'm not going to get involved in this. I'm going to go make money again. Heck with this humanitarian stuff. But another sports car in the driveway wasn't really that fulfilling at a certain point, after a point. And that's when I met Doc Childry, who's the founder of HeartMath, via some friends from back in the consciousness studies days and that part of my life. And so he was on the East Coast at that time, and went to, I'll go meet this guy, he'd been recommended by mutual friends who I respect, and figured I'd go spend an hour. And I ended up spending 3 days. We obviously hit it off. And so he had a very different perspective and an energy and energetic about him too. It wasn't just the words. So through that experience, I had some experience, my own kind of, I'll call it awakening to what the heart really is during time with him, not just the concept and whip energy through the heart chakra and all that stuff that all the other approaches were. So best I could, started practicing. This is long before HeartMath and formal techniques and things we have now. And I can honestly say that I made more growth in many levels of my own personal life in 3 months than I had in years of meditation practices. Now, that's not to say I didn't get a lot out of those years of meditation. I did, but that might have been what prepped me for that next evolutionary jump. It really was a jump in the evolution of my own personal consciousness. So then I started bringing some of those ideas and concepts into my employees and the company.
Yeah,
and it seemed to help.
The rest is history, Rollin. So, first of all, thank you for sharing your story. And I think I've heard pieces of it, but it was nice to hear of it all in sort of a summary there. I want to speak about coherence. I want to go there next, but my curiosity inside of me wants to know an answer to a question that you dropped. Before that, though, I just want to welcome all the beautiful souls joining us on Facebook Live. Welcome. If you have questions for Rollin today, if anything bubbles up around HeartMath, pop it in the comments. I would love to add your voice into this chat. Rollin, you said within this experience, as you were transitioning into HeartMath, there was this awakening moment where you remembered what the heart actually is.
I wouldn't say I remembered.
Yeah. Well, how would you answer that question? What did you discover what the heart actually is?
Well, okay. So, we can fast forward a lot of years of research and practice and experience, but to answer that, I'd have to say that we have to realize there are two hearts. Physical heart.
Yep.
Which is way more of a blood pump, by the way. And then what I call the energetic heart, and I'm not the originator of that. That's been around a long time, or the spiritual heart, as it's called, even in more ancient type context. And so I'd say, what have I discovered? It's real. It is not a metaphor. The energetic heart is a real thing with real structure, just in another, think of it as dimension of density that we can't yet put under a microscope. And then we can't put a thought, a feeling, an intuition, subjective experience at all of any kind really under a microscope and see it, right, and probe it. So the energetic heart is the bridge, if you want to think of it that way. It's a good analogy. So I can be more specific, but to our here at HeartMath, we just call it your larger self. And there's other term we use that term in a literal way, but to take it out of spiritual or new age kind of concepts, because we really do mean this in a literal way. But you can also refer to it as your higher self, to your spirit, to your soul, the God within, whatever you want to language, depending upon your culture and background and belief systems.
I love it, Rollin. So you probably don't know this, but on this podcast, I speak mostly about what you're saying here. So this is for everyone tuning in. It's just nice to hear it from your lens, from your deeply scientific, practical lens. That now, and this is why I really love HeartMath and the work that's being done, is that there's this science and this validation. And when I say remembered, Rollin, I don't mean remembered in this lifetime. Okay. I would say that the soul, the higher soul that you are, it knew that previously, right? Would you agree with that?
Well, yeah. I mean, that gets into a whole other discussion, but yeah, from that.
Yeah. I'll try and keep it. I won't get too off into the mystical space today. Rollin, let's go back a bit now. I want to Thank you for your background and answering that for me. I want to now define something else that HeartMath has been really powerful in illuminating for people is heart coherence. So I'm wondering if you can, for people that maybe are new to that, what does heart coherence mean?
Yeah, we'll start with coherence.
Yep.
For people who are new to that. And I think a lot of people, most people these days have at least a general sense of what the term coherence means. And I'm going to skip right to the scientific perspective, which is how we use it and mean it. And coherence is a term used to describe how well the parts of a complex system are working together. Are they working in harmonious relationship in a way that's energy efficient, right, and stable? And there's a bunch of important things umbrellaed under that term and concept of coherence, energy efficiency being one, but also that the wholeness or the output of a system or the parts of the system are greater than the sum of the parts. That's an embedded idea. So, and coherence is a term that's used in science, everything from the very small molecular scale all the way to the universe. We talk about the coherence amongst these systems. Now, for the parts of a system, and obviously us as human beings, we are extremely complex systems. Any living system is very complex, but especially us. Because we're having to cohere, if you will, and things come together and cooperate in a wholeness from the very small, right? I mean, atoms are having to become molecules, and molecules, organs, and organ systems working together across many scales and across time, right? Otherwise, we wouldn't be healthy living beings at all. So it's for the parts of any complex system to work together, there has to be communication between the parts. And that can be many forms, right? And that some of that's still a mystery in terms of living systems, but hormones and neural pulses and the kind of gross scale. And a lot of our interest is on the energetic communication that goes on. I'm getting a little bit off track here, but
no, but it's aligning. So then where does the heart come into that?
Yeah, so that's what we mean by coherence.
Yeah.
Okay, so starting with that, the heart coherence, this might be a better way to explain that. Back in the early days of our lab here at the HeartMath Research Center, and this is the early 90s, we started by we're a primary psychophysiology lab, looking at the physiology or the physiological correlates or what goes on in our body with different emotional states, like a lot of people start that way. We were a little different in that we were also interested in a lot of people would call positive emotions. And this, you have to remember, in the early 90s, in the scientific literature, the public peer-reviewed scientific literature, there weren't very many studies like this. This was long before the positive psychology movement, which I'm thrilled about, by the way. That came many years later. So in addition to things like, stress and frustration and anger and these types of emotions, we were also looking at things like appreciation, compassion, what happens when we're really heartfelt feelings, those things. And we were looking at lots of things back then. I mean, everything you can think of, pretty much, brain waves and blood pressure and hormones and skin conductance and all this kind of stuff. And what emerged from those early years was that when we're feeling things like appreciation, gratitude, compassion, these higher, I would say, frequency emotions now in later language, that something amazing was happening with the best indicator of that, of all the physiological things, was the activity of the heart. And in particular, the heart rhythm. And it was shifting. It wasn't a subtle thing. Our physiology was literally shifting into a different functional mode. It's best reflected in the rhythmic pattern of the heart. And then we later called heart coherence. And a lot of reasons for that. So that was kind of a rabbit to follow down the hole.
That was beautiful. No, Rollin, I think that described it beautifully. And it leads me to ask a question here. And this comes from the lovely Sharon in the Facebook chat. Sharon asks, how do you not fear love? Or in another way of saying it, how do you open up to it? And from what you're saying, we could answer that question in many ways, but connecting to heart coherence, and you can correct me if I'm wrong here. But one way to sort of bring in love or open to love from the outside world would be to get into that coherent state first, correct?
Well, yeah. I mean, I'm not sure I fully understand the question yet, but
well, let's use an example. So let's say we're stepping into a new relationship, and we want to bring in love from that person from the outside. We want to open ourselves up to a new way of loving.
Be open to someone else's love.
Yeah. And overcoming the possible fear around that.
Yeah. So rather than giving you a linear history here, kind of going back to how we started the conversation, when we're able to be there's a lot of benefits from being in a heart coherent state. I mean, physiologically, lowered blood pressure, better hormonal balance, blah, 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 blah. I mean, 400 and some studies later that have been published, independent studies, we know that. But the bigger game here, I would say, or the really end game from the HeartMath perspective, from my perspective, is that when we're in that heart coherent state, it's opening that channel from the energetic heart to our larger self. And so we're decreasing the separation between who we really are at that deeper level and our day-to-day physical heart, mind, brain, physical systems. So it's that flow of intuition from our larger self that it becomes our inner GPS, as a way of thinking of it, our inner guidance system. And so really being able to tune in to follow that is really whether it's in a new relationship or just the decisions and choices we're making in day-to-day life, is really my answer there. And now if we have a lot of traumas, blocks, and what blocks that connection is fear, it's frustration, it's anger, it's separation. We tend to blame the heart sometimes for lack of connection, but it's really not. That's more the brain, and it's past memories and
traumas. Yeah.
So I don't know if that's not a direct.
Rollin, you're on fire today. You're smashing it out of the park. What I would add to it for Sharon's sake, and I think you highlighted it beautifully, that energetic heart that opens to that higher self, what it's made of, it's not made of fear, right? It's made of, in the Vedic perspective, it's the, Ananda, it's bliss, it's pure expansion, it's pure consciousness. So what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, yeah, all those things, but it's really intelligence.
Yeah.
In what you could think of as our blueprint. I mean, it's really there, always wanting us to come out. Because, boy, let's get a bit esoteric here, but
Rollin, this podcast is all esoteric, so you go as deep as you want.
Well, I mean, Earth, coming into the Earth system it's an advanced school for the evolution of consciousness, and so that's really what it's really all about. And that evolution of consciousness is exactly what we're talking about. It is learning to connect with our larger self and be able to live in that frequency more at higher and higher ratios in the density of Earth, in the choices we make and the decisions we make. And, free will is a real thing here in the Earth dimension and plane. So if it wasn't that way, so we kind of have to forget who we really are when we come into this level of density and waking up to that through life's journeys.
Can I ask a question with this, Rollin? Because we're here now, so let's just keep playing with this. And I appreciate you going deep with me. What would you say to that soul in that situation that you just outlined that is using their free will, and maybe they're using their free will to not tap into their heart coherence, they're using their free will to not open up to their higher consciousness, and that soul holds guilt for that. That soul holds judgment for not doing the right thing.
No, souls don't hold judgment. That you kind of missed what I'm really saying there, in that this it is about consciousness. The evolution of consciousness is about learning to reconnect to that when we're in this level of density. And boy, I'm not sure how far down this rabbit hole I want to go. So we're way outside of the science here, but
as far as you feel comfortable, Rollin, it's up to you.
Yeah. So I mean, I'm very comfortable in this world, but so we are always making choices, right? And they either come to the mind or the heart, and we get the feedback here. So I would also go one step, being that you've opened this can of worms in a way. That way, even before we come in and integrate into the Earth system in a human form, we have a blueprint that we've chosen at our higher, larger self level for that next step of our evolutionary process. From my perspective, is many, many lifetimes.
And
right?
Karma probably weaves into this, correct?
Well, yeah. I would put it a little different in that karma may be lessons we've yet to learn. So we would set up particular blueprints to have the opportunity to learn through those things. And it's all, our large is all about our growth. That's kind of the big game in a way for the School of Earth. And so we think of it, what if, let me put it this way, what if a bunch of us were sitting around a table up there in the other dimensional plane and saying, okay, now we're going on this mission to Earth, and, you're going to go be you're going to go work in the kitchens, and you're going to get cancer and learn how to have more compassion for people. And we'll meet up about so-and-so age and so on. What if it really is that way? Or that. The more aligned we are with our larger self, the more we're following our trajectory for our blueprint. But we have choice, and we can get sidetracked. And
I think I love it, Rollin.
You have to do it around again, a couple more rounds until you finally get it.
And I think that's I guess what I was trying to hit at, Rollin, is when we come back again, right? And you said it beautifully. There's nothing that holds judgment on that, right? Because I think I can speak from my experience, and maybe you can share your thoughts on this. Right? I grew up in certain teachings, and I share them all the time on the podcast, that that there's a power outside of me that's holding judgment whether I do the thing right or wrong, right? And there are a lot of people that fit into that box, but that's not what you're saying, right? We'll just come back again to play the Earth School, right?
Yeah, I mean, at our larger self, there's no such thing as judgment, and in the way that we do it down here in human terms. In fact, it's our judgments and blames and we're talking about 3D consciousness, right? I mean, and 3D is way better than 2D, in the evolutionary journey. But if you think about it, I've heard people say, until we can get back to the good old days when we were all aligned, and I'm kind of like, what are you talking about? What, you mean when we stuck people on crosses and because the evolution of consciousness is really speeding up. So anyway,
Rollin, this is beautiful. Thank you for going there with me. These are just the things that I think about all the time, and my community thinks about too. So I wanted to play a little bit. Let's come back and tune into HeartMath from another lens. And I want to ask about, we spoke about the coherence, right? We spoke about the connection to other people through it, right? But I'm wondering if you can go into this phenomena or this deeper science now that HeartMath is doing about, the field that we start to project from our hearts, the field that we can measure and pick up on.
Sure. That when we put electrodes across your chest to measure the electrocardiogram, right, the heartbeat. I mean, why is it called the electrocardiogram? What you're measuring is the electricity. And in this case, quite literally now, you're measuring the flow of current, electrical current. In this case, it's biologically generated through ions, but it's still electrical current. And whenever you have a flow of current, I mean, this is physics 101, right? You create a magnetic field. Any flowing current creates magnetic fields. Now, the electrodes don't see the magnetic field. They measure current flow. That requires a different instrument. It's called a magnetometer. So, and this is well understood. I mean, we know the sources of these current flows and things at the biological level. But one of the qualities of a magnetic field is they go through things. That's why cell phones, back to my engineering days, right? This, which I knew a lot about, is communications. We know a lot about how to use fields, electromagnetic fields, to carry information. You know, when you're on your phone, you send a text message. Well, it's the field carrying that information from your phone to the cell tower and vice versa and so on. But the point here is why it's the magnetic component. See, electric and magnetic fields are very different things. They're not the same. It's the magnetic component that goes through things. That's why cell phones work indoors, right? If you don't believe me, stop using your phone, right? Indoors anyway. So the magnetic field generated by the current flows in the body and from the heart easily radiate external to the body and can be measured with magnetometers. That's how I know this. It's not some idea. We stick a probe out here, a magnetic probe, and measure it. And this is going back into the later 90s for us. We were got the idea, well, maybe we're radiating emotional information. Let's measure the field and see if we can decode that information. Same thing I used to do at Motorola, using the same techniques actually to decode the information being carried by fields. It was actually kind of easy to do. Once you understand the modulation strategy. So we knew then that what we feel inside doesn't stop at the skin. We are literally broadcasting and radiating that. And then so the next step in that line of inquiry was, well, that's neat, so what? Our nervous system's also antennas that receive that information from others. And that actually was a fairly easy step to show. So I was actually really surprised that no one else had ever done that. It wasn't that hard. And so anyway, where that's many years later, I can, many projects and studies later, with pretty good confidence say that there's always an energetic communication that's going on between people or within groups that's beyond, maybe below, in some ways more important than the information or of the words we choose, the tone of voice, the body language. That's all important, and a lot is conveyed there. There's also an energetic communication. This kind of gets back to the question that the lady asked about a new relationship, because there's that energetic information. And
well, let me jump in here, Rollin, because I'm so excited that I have you on the show to really break down so articulately what you just described with the field of the heart, because this is the cosmic love antenna. And one of the reasons I named it that, and I do the work that I do in the world, is the very thing that you just described, right? This antenna system that we constantly are, we're receiving and projecting a frequency that is beyond, as you said, the physical modality that we are. I'd love for you to speak to how does one, so if I understood everything you just said, if I'm just tuning to this for the first time, how does one start to, in your experience from HeartMath or beyond, how does one start to modulate that field? How do I, so an example that you gave, walk into a room and connect to someone with that field?
Yeah, the answer is easy. The actual doing it is not so easy, but run love through your system. Because let me say it this way, Harrison. In today's world, we can measure the field and the information being carried by it, demodulating, decoding that information, those information patterns, and tell with about 75% accuracy somebody's emotional state. Okay, so that kind of,
holds that information.
The frequency information, or the informational patterns, as I like to call them, right, writing on the field, are very different if we're feeling love or if we're feeling frustration or anger or something like that. They're radically different information patterns. So love more if we want to change that information. Appreciate, be kind, but you can't just think it. You actually have to feel it. You have to be it. That's what's reflected in the fields. It's the true emotional feeling of it. And how do we do that? Well, how do we do that? Then you're connecting. It's really getting. So one of the biggest, I've kind of already said this, but one of the biggest benefits of learning how to shift into heart coherence. There's a lot of stuff going on in our physiology for our benefit, but is that we are connecting with our larger self. It's opening that radio frequency, that channel between our larger self and actually it's the DNA. I mean, it's the energetic heart is actually communicating with all the DNA and all the cells. That's where the blueprint for us comes from. But in fact, I'm doing a class on that on the Shift Network. My next class is really about the DNA connection to the energetic heart.
Yeah. It's so deep, Rollin. This is, again, another reason I'm so excited about the HeartMath and everything, all the work that's being done. And we'll get to this later, but it's a bridge. Use the analogy for the heart being a bridge, but I see the HeartMath being a bridge to these deeper states of consciousness where we now have all these beautiful tests and validation for people that, we spoke about fear before. One of the biggest reasons we fear something is we don't know what's going on. We don't have the information. I think HeartMath is really filling that role, correct?
Yeah, I mean, fear can be a useful thing. You're right. I mean, that gets into brain physiology, and we can go down that rabbit hole, amygdala, and familiar, not familiar. So a lot of times fear is we're not familiar. We don't have a historical or baseline reference to being able to navigate a new person, or a place that it's safe and all that. But if we don't have that familiarity and that history to let us know what's safe, not safe, fear may be a good thing, or being a little more careful, if we're navigating a new place so we're not familiar with, or meeting new people. Not necessarily fear, but there's a certain, I don't mean fear, but there's a certain vigilance that.
Yeah. Well, can I add something to that point? Get your thoughts on this, Rollin. From what we've spoken about thus far, let's use the example of a relationship because it came up with a question. And let's say the brain is responding with fear, maybe based off past trauma. In that moment, if I open up my energetic heart and invite my deeper knowing connected to that spirit and that soul, that would be a way to move through that fear, correct? Because it would know more than what the fear does.
Yeah, if we're really aligning with our larger self and that energetics, I mean, we need not be naive here. Maybe we are coming up with a person that we really don't want to, that isn't very nice. I mean, that's possible, right? So there's the different levels and layers to this. Just through I talk about the three types of intuition in a lot of my writings. One is energetic sensitivity, which is not the same as what we're talking about here, where we're able to really reach our big nervous system level antenna is receiving that information being rated in the field that we were just talking about. And we've learned how to recognize those patterns, that information. So sometimes it really just doesn't feel good to be around certain people.
Mm. And there's guidance coming for that to not just be around that person anymore.
Yeah. And on the other hand, we can, there's really the whole understanding of what the amygdalas do is really important. It is one level of this, because what the amygdalas do, one of the main brain centers involved in emotional processing and experience, is what their real job is to determine what's familiar and not familiar. So, in fact, I went way earlier in my life when I was, in my early teens or mid-teens, somewhere in there. There was a person that I had met, and I had an instant not liking of.
The politically correct way of saying it.
It was. We just, and I didn't understand it then. I do now. But there were qualities about that person that unconsciously the amygdala remembers, that the baselines that it forms, of a bully that I had in way earlier years. right? So that it made that match so unsafe, fear. Well, the irony of that story is that person later became one of my very best friends, right? Once we
moved through it.
Moved through it and got past
Yeah.
that. But our what we are perceiving in the world is there's these different filters that we're going through. One is the histories, and the amygdala is always looking for that match of familiar, not familiar. And those references that we're matching to can be either positive or negative, or optimistic or pessimistic based on past histories. But it's affecting our perceptions in the now, almost always at an unconscious level that we don't have conscious access to. But our larger self can kind of rise above that if we're able to tune into that.
Which brings me to my next question here, Rollin. Beautiful segue. So I've noticed in my work and the teachings that I share and the podcast and my one-on-one work, this heart coherence and this opening up of the energetic heart and the higher self coming in, one of the best ways to practice that and flex that muscle, if you will, if you want to call it that, is practicing present moment awareness, is coming into this present moment. So I'm wondering if you could speak to, where does presence and mindfulness of this current moment factor into heart coherence and everything we've talked about thus far?
Well, I'm sorry to be corrective, but I wouldn't say that we open up the energetic heart. Okay. It's always there, and it's always there it's always building that bridge, whether we know it or not. What we're opening is our mind and that channel for
Love it.
To be able to become aware of and start listening to what's really been there all along.
Thank you for that reframe.
Yeah, it's okay, but I just wanted for anybody that might be listening, it's well, restate the question. Sorry, I just sidetracked myself.
Well, no, and you answered it in a way already. But I guess I wanted to know from your perspective, that where does becoming present in now, how does that impact everything?
Yeah, well,
versus being in the past or projecting into the future.
Yeah, I mean, we're all wired differently. You know, I mean, and this is actually true, and there's a lot of research around this. Some this really gets down to brain physiology and connectivity, but some of us are more wired to live in the past, some more in the now. I'm more in that kind of wiring, and some are more future oriented, and we can shift back and forth. So there's not a pat answer. It's kind of why I wanted to give context. Usually things aren't as black and white as we would like them to. But practicing being more in the moment is a good thing. I mean, I think, especially if we're practicing being able to be aligned, you know, to have our heart and mind aligned in the moment, so that we're not past or, you know,
future
projecting about the future.
Yeah,
it can be negative or positive, right? And so it's that real time alignment with our larger self that's, I think, really what the key is. And that's what takes us into the real flow. What I think of as being able to flow through whatever we draw, right? Whatever life brings us, with more grace, more ease, less stress, right? Making better choices through that.
I love it. I follow a lot of Eckhart Tolle's teachings, and I'm sure you've had that in your journey at some point too.
I know the essence of it.
Yeah. And he speaks about, which I really resonate with, that higher self, that soul that we've been referencing in many ways today through the heart. It doesn't exist in the past or the future. It exists in the present moment now. I'm wondering, what are your thoughts on that? Do you agree? Is there?
No, I would agree. I mean, we all the cells in our bodies right now are existing in this present moment, but that doesn't mean they don't have a past history and a future trajectory based on the choices we make in the now.
And all the healing, I would say, like let's use a trauma, let's use a physical trauma as an example, right? They happened in the past and they're impacting us in the present, and we heal them now in the present. We don't heal them in the past, right?
Yeah, that would be true. Yeah.
Yeah. Another component I want to get your thoughts on, Rollin, in terms of this HeartMath, all the HeartMath studies and the coherence and everything you've beautifully articulated today, is where does the breath come into this? Because we spoke about presence, we spoke about the heart and the energetic fields. One of the other big tools that I practice myself and teach people to get into these states is factoring in different kinds of breath work. So I'm wondering, what's your view on the role of the breath in heart coherence and, again, everything we've danced through today?
Yeah, well, it's really important. In that, I mean, obviously breathing is important. I mean, come on, but from breath work and being able to regulate our breath, it is the one typically autonomic function that we can easily intervene with and choose to breathe slower, breathe deeper, and so on. So it gives us a really neat window into being able to shift our physiology. And so there are a gazillion breath techniques out there. Everything, from the yogic techniques, nostril breathing. I learned all that, forgotten most of it now. I'm just being honest. Well, and I've done a lot of trainings. We developed the program the resilience program for the U.S. Navy. I'm honored to say we did that work. So I trained 5,000 men and women, and that were getting ready to go into the highest stress job or mission there was in the military at that time. And I just did this as kind of a bridge into it about the breathing, but usually just ask them, how many of you have learned a breathing technique somewhere along your journey? And a lot of, depending upon the group, some would know hardly any had. Others a lot had. And ask, well, what's the context? And it's, so you hear I've learned about breathing from scuba diving to Lamaze class, to yoga, to meditation, to on the shooting range, to be able to right point of the breath to get the best shot. I mean, why? It's because it works. It's something that gives us that. It's taught across so many different disciplines and reasons. I like to think of it as grandma's wisdom. If, because grandma's there and the little kid, falls down and they're crying, and you pick them up, and, as soon as you make sure they're not bleeding or something, squirting blood out, what's grandma say? Breathe, honey. Take a breath, right? Because we know that until they calm down, that they're not going to be able to hear anything, that they're just, they're dysregulated.
Yeah. I think that's the key, Rollin. I think that dysregulation, sorry to interrupt, but it's just so, I know for me, when I'm speaking about these heart components and heart coherence and getting into the heart energetically, the breath, one of the main roles it plays is in the helping us move through dysregulation and coming back into that harmony.
Yeah. So breathing, now we can advance breathing a little bit once we understand the physiology and coherence. And an aspect of heart coherence that we're talking about, remember I mentioned earlier, Harrison, there's a lot of stuff going on in the body when we're in a coherent state. As it turns out, we have a natural resonant frequency that exists in our bodies. And this has to do with the resonant frequencies, literally, between the neural loops and the blood flow between the heart, brain, and lung system. And that's in frequency language, it's 0.1 hertz is the center of the bell curve for humanity. And by the way, most animals have the same resonant frequency. It seems to be scale invariant. And it also is the resonant frequency of the Earth's magnetic field vibrations.
Yeah, funny that.
Interesting.
Yeah. So
it's a 10-second rhythm, 5 seconds. So if you're breathing, if we understand that, and this is why, since we started this, it was our research that kind of everybody's talking about coherence breathing or breathing in a 10-second rhythm or the 6 breaths per minute. It's also talked about different ways. That came out of our early research showing that our resonant frequency, what it is So if we breathe at our natural resonant frequency, which is going to be around 4 or 5 seconds on the in breath and 4 or 5 seconds on the out breath, point is that, that 10-second rhythm or around that, we're now breathing at our resonant frequency, which moves us into heart coherence. There are connections, and the physiology of it's pretty simple. Other than the resonant loops, but in the lungs, we have neurons that are sensitive to stretch. We breathe in, those neurons expand, and they increase their output, their firing rate output. They travel up the vagus, certain pathways in the vagus nerve to the brainstem, and they inhibit the flow of parasympathetic outflow or vagal outflow to the heart. So heart rate goes up. You breathe out, you release that, so parasympathetic outflow is restored to its tonic level, heart rate goes down. So whatever rhythm we're breathing at, we're modulating the heart rhythm. And this is actually the mechanism by which breathing techniques work. So at least, especially in short term, like grandma, breathe, honey, right? It's not getting more oxygen in the blood. That people got that wrong. So the reason that we can take the intensity out of an emotion, or we stub our toe in the pain by breathing at that rhythm, is because we're modulating the heart rhythm, and the heart sends far more information to the brain than the other way around. So we can use breathing to change that pattern. And if we breathe it into a coherent rhythm, that's now the neural information going up to the amygdalas and different parts of the brain that it then interprets as, oh, everything's okay. Calm down, get in sync, right? Literally.
It's so beautiful. I get getting so excited, Rollin, because I'm learning so much from you today, even in areas that I thought I had some pretty good understanding around. Even just that, what you just described, put a domino over in my mind around. I feel that's one of the reasons, energetically, when we tune into the heart chakra, for example, the heart chakra, anatomically, it has a resonance, not just with the heart organ, but also with the lungs too, right? And in many ways, I think, it's connected to what you're saying here. Rollin, I have a few more questions here before I let you go on your beautiful evening. And this last one is more of a sort of an observation that I've seen through the world at the moment that I'd love to get your thoughts on. HeartMath as a movement, institution, I've personally seen holds a role of bridging the divide between these esoteric spiritual consciousness teachings that have been around in the East for thousands of years and the science that a lot of us, and no judgment here, I would fall into this group to a degree, a lot of us who, wait on the science to validate a practice to be true or not. So my question for you, Rollin, is where do you see HeartMath as playing a role stepping into the future between these two sort of groups?
Yeah, well, a couple ways I could answer that. I mean, I often get accused of being kind of leading the charge in some ways of bridging science and spirituality. And I don't mean that in a bad way, because it's quite a compliment, but I can say, well, if you view spirituality as helping people learn how to become more in charge of themselves, how to self-regulate, to be kinder, more collaborative, cooperative people, great. And then we're doing that. Because that's really what it's about, is aligning with who we really are, right? In our larger self. So, HeartMath really does exist from the very beginning to help facilitate the shift in global consciousness. Our mission is global. And the reason, kind of going back to this story I shared, we started with, when I said, screw this humanitarian stuff, I'm not going to get it back involved in these types of things unless it's something that can shift consciousness on a global scale. And that's what HeartMath is about. It really is helping people, providing very intentionally simple techniques and processes that give us the straight line pathway to connecting with who we really are, so that we're starting to bring which is starting to evolve our consciousness to the level, become more self-aware and can self-regulate our thoughts and our emotions from that larger perspective, that more intelligent perspective, so that we become less separated from who we really are. But that also then comes out. You can think of that as
Into the
vertical.
whole.
Then the horizontal, then we start becoming more connected with other people and with the earth, and start being more responsible for what we're feeding the field, and out and becoming kinder, more collaborative, cooperative people.
It's so beautiful. Rollin, it's been a pleasure to get to feel that field, not just, and I would like to add myself into those people that accuse you of being that bridge and that gateway, because I've got to experience it today. I've had awareness of you and heard you in other places before, but it's been a pleasure to actually meet the soul behind this work and the things that you're projecting. So thank you for being on your soul mission in many ways and leading the charge, as you said. For people that have tuned in today, I would highly recommend, we've briefly hit on HeartMath. Please go check out all the things that the Institute is doing, all the practices. It's exploding in many ways. Can you speak to that for a moment here, Rollin? What's exciting in the HeartMath currently that you wish to promote and get out to people listening?
Well, if there are people who are really interested in the personal practices, really connecting with them, their deeper selves, and the practical how to navigate day-to-day life, I would recommend the book Heart Intelligence. There's a new edition that was authored by Doc Childrey, our founder, myself, and a couple of my colleagues. If you want to know more about the science, our heartmath.org website's full of stuff. There's a research library with literally hundreds of published papers and things. What we're currently endeavoring in on the science side is, our research spans from, I put it in three kind of buckets, if you will. Personal coherence, 30 years of that kind of research on the psychophysiology of heart, brain communication and so on. Social coherence, or relational coherence. How do we get along better with other people, our families, or work teams? So we have new programs, certification programs, just for bringing more coherence into teams and any groups of people that work together. And then the global coherence has really been our focus for a few years now. It's called the Global Coherence Initiative. And under that, this is where we're currently focused. Under that umbrella of GCI, or Global Coherence Initiative, we've got magnetometers all around the earth measuring the resonant frequencies of the earth and how we're bidirectionally affecting the field. The field affects us and we affect the fields of the earth. But our current project is, for those that aren't aware of it, is the Global Consciousness Project, which is a global, I think of it as a global scientific instrument. It's separated devices around the world that are measuring changes in what we call the global consciousness field. As this global network of devices reacts in a synchronized way globally. And so the new version of that we spent the last 2 years developing, and a lot of work has gone into this kind of a complicated project. It's called GCP2, and it's a citizen scientist project for people that might want to get involved and host one of these devices. They're called random number generators, the next generation of these devices. GCP2.net is where you can apply to be a citizen scientist and host one. And we've also got a global tree project. It's all part of the interconnectivity work to measure the electroactivity of trees globally and see how they might be responding as a whole.
Love it. Love it. I will, for all the people tuning in on the podcast, I'll put all these details in the show notes and you can go straight to them, and people can sign up as the citizens of the Consciousness Project. Yeah, all through that website. And now I'm actually going to put more of Rollin's details too, to check him out as the powerful soul he is. Rollin, you're so welcome. My final question here today, before I let you go, as I explained earlier in our chat, when I was really excited as you were explaining about the antenna system, one of the reasons I connected into this idea of the cosmic love antenna is on my journey, I became disillusioned with the idea that my higher power was something outside of me on a cloud, and how I came back to my reconnection to truth was seeing in many ways that love is my higher power and how I express it. So I'm interested in your world, Rollin. How do you personally define that love word yourself?
Oh, I'm not going to define love, because that's just too broad. I mean, we've got
another podcast.
Well, I mean, I'll just do a little quick wrap on that. I mean, we've got our human embodied experience of love. It varies from, love of a spouse, right? A lover, to love of your mother and father, your children, to, family members, love of country. It goes on. And they're all different qualities, but then there's those, and I'm among them, that believes in that, in my own experience, that love is I see love, the real love we're talking about is intelligence. And it is the intelligence that created the universe and everything in it. And I'll say, well, I know we're a little past time. Irvin Laszlo, you probably know Irvin, awesome man in his 90s, did a speaking spot on our last event that we do, an annual event called the Global Consciousness Event. And Irvin put it in a way that I sort of had thought up, but didn't ever articulate as elegantly as he did. And he basically said, from the moment of the Big Bang, there is an intelligence embedded into the fabric of the universe that is evolving us towards coherence.
I love that.
Right. So that is that love, if you will. And so my parting thoughts would be that, and I'll tell you, from my many years of trying to get degrees in consciousness and 30 years of HeartMath research, it gets really simple for me that the highest, best thing we can do for ourselves, others, the planet, and even the universe is to run more heart energy, more love through our energetic system. So you're right on. So, and love more.
Beautifully said, Rollin. My chest feels warm after you said all that. Irvin Laszlo, I am familiar with his work, but I haven't heard that expression, that definition. It's beautiful. I think I found my little clip to put at the start of this episode. Rollin, thank you for your time today. Thank you for your grace. Thank you for your love and your immense wisdom and knowledge. I appreciate you. I send you so much love, and thank you for connecting. Received. For everyone that's joined us live, either on Facebook, LinkedIn, or YouTube, or if you're listening on the podcast, I hope this hits your heart today. If it did, please share this out far and wide. Leave your feedback. You know where to leave it. But regardless, we send you love. We send you light. And until next time here on the show, stay beautiful. Bye, everyone. Thank you for listening to the Cosmic Love Antenna with me, your host, Harrison. If you gained value or this episode hit your heart, please remember to share this out with a friend, a family member, or a lover. You can also leave your love over on Apple reviews and Spotify star feedback, and this helps me spread my frequency to more souls in need. Finally, if you want to connect with me deeper, want to reach out, interested in coaching, please follow me on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and LinkedIn at Harrison Meagher, Meagher spelled Meagher. Sending you so much love.
Electricast.